Go ahead and get started. This is not one of those public meetings where we have a full-blown presentation and take questions and those kinds of things. What it is more of an open house where you have an opportunity to go throughout and look at the different options that we have come up with, or the architects have come up with for us in terms of the new government center and the judicial building project. But what we want to do is to be able to at least share a 10-minute video with you, and that video is going to depict some of the conditions at the government center. This is the tour that took place, a couple of months or so ago. We did a tour of the government center and invited the public to come out and to really see for themselves some of the issues that we've had to deal with at the government center, and that's what this is. We will have, or should have, one of our architects here with us as well that will be able to help answer some of the questions regarding some of those, the three options or scenarios that we have. The Mayor's Commission, the New Government Center and Judicial Building Commission, actually have been meeting, if you will, since early this year, and with that has come up with a number of different things that we need to look at, things that we know that we have got to do, but of course what we want to do is to get input from the public. And during those tours of the government center was one of those things, and then of course here today to be able to provide you with kind of what we're looking at, and nothing is set in stone at this point in terms of those scenarios. That's all they are. Those are just putting the pencil to the pen to the paper, if you will, and something for us to start with. But we do want you to have an opportunity just to look at that. Ask us any questions that you have regarding what you see, what you like to see, what you think should happen. And then you have the survey in front of you that you can write your comments on, and that we will take back to the commission and look at all of those. As you know, we do have the concurrent meetings going on at the three other locations as well, and doing the same type of process. And so with that, what we would like to do is go ahead, show the video, and that way for those who were not able to go and tour the government center, we will show you kind of where we are. And so Scott, thank you for being here as well. So, okay. So
the only two floors that have sprinkler protection is currently this ground floor and the basement. That's it. The other 10 floors and the parking garage. That is it. Everything else does not have any type of sprinkler. We have our fire extinguishers on that side and for your to put out a fire, that's going to be the way to get to them.
The building was never designed for sprinklers on upper floors?
Well, like I said,
it's not working.
From what we were told is that it was a cost issue at that point when they were doing the last final approval to get all the sprinkler systems done, and it was one of the things that was not thought through. I don't know if you've ever noticed that trailer that's sitting out here. That is our current backup generator. The old one is right here. The system has just served its life. Right now we have a transfer switch here, and you see these giant cords that run here. Like I said, with Lieutenant Hicks, with that being kind of outside of our building envelope, that is a security concern. So if we ever had a power outage, and if somebody something could happen to the building, they could pull our backup generator, and we've actually had that issue. When we tried to flip it over to test it, we found out that there was wires out there loose. So that is a main concern that we deal with here. Also, while we're here, the sprinkler system here, that is the system there. Now, technically by code now, we would need to have a backflow preventer on that fire system, which we currently do not have. So that would be a concern as well. And obviously this is only for those two floors. So obviously you can imagine the size of piping that we would need if it was to do all 12 floors and the wings. And you currently see that we're underground. Also, you can see the concrete construction here. So even logistically trying to get this generator out of here, you see that door, that's the only way out of here, correct? I think there's another side door, but this is it. So therefore, any of this bigger machinery, when it breaks down, they have to repair it in place. There's a couple months back, I had sent the letter letting council know about the concerns we had about the hot water. This is the hot water heating system, so it's a boiler system. It's just the hot water that provides heat to the building. The concern is when it's up under here, it's under this insulation, we don't know the condition of the pipes. And so, what wing was it, Johnny? It was the east wing. We had that pipe failure where it just totally corroded and burst. And so we had hot water, everything kind of shooting out. And if you've noticed, between here and wherever we are, there are no cutoff valves. So therefore, if it breaks here, we're almost having to run all the way back into the building to find any type of cutoff to isolate the issue. It would just be hot water spewing out. So we have somewhere between 200 and 300 boxes like this all over the building. So therefore, that was the concern, is that at any place, either coming in or going back out, you can see this condensation. If it's happening up under that insulation, it's just sitting there and rusting that pipe out all the time. So that was the concern there. So we wanted to show you this one. This is probably one of the worst we've got. The rest of them aren't as bad. We've done investigations to kind of isolate the worst of the worst. We scheduled to have a mechanical contractor come in start next month to start working on this.
We have them in each one of these all the way down to the end.
Correct.
Okay, and this is just the records room and the deed room.
That's correct. It's on the other end.
The other.
Yes, ma'am. Also, we'd like to point out, you'll start to see some more of these, which is portable cooling units to maintain the temperatures in the building, because any of our air conditioning systems are coming off those windows, and any of, like I said, depending on if you're on the south side of the building all day, you're burning up. Then you're on the other side of the building, you're freezing. So there's no, and with the whole system being one system, there's not split into zones or anything like that. They just have to set a temperature, and you just kind of have to live with the situation. So you will start to see more and more of these as we go into people's offices, because either they're too hot or too cold, and having another way to be able to regulate the spaces is just not set up. Yes, sir. By any current standards, these are not ADA compliant. You don't have your turn radiuses, you don't have your grab bars, you don't have your handicap accessible restroom. You don't have it. It's not, and you know, everybody's like, well, just make the restroom bigger. But you have offices that are all around them that would make that a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot harder. You don't have your 5-foot clear turn radius here. So if somebody with a wheelchair were to come in here, they're stuck right here. They can't use these bathrooms. The ones that we did install on the first floor are handicap accessible, but if you're on any of the other floors, you do not have access. You, like I said, you get right here in a wheelchair, you could not get anywhere.
These are the original wills. Then, and Joy, I'm going to just... The other thing we have to store for 6 years, and I'm happy to shred after 6 years, are the gun permits. All of this and all of those are weapons carry licenses and people's criminal background checks. So we're, as you can see, we're literally running out of space for this as well. For a courtroom, in counties in which the population is over 90,000 people, as of 1998, you have a right to a 12-person jury trial to decide whether or not the gold digger should receive the benefits under the will. So we have to have a jury box for that. But as you can see, you can't even put the plaintiff's table and the respondent's table side by side. We have them turned this way because the involuntary psychiatric commitment respondent sits in that corner there, and before, when we had the tables turned a different way, one of them tried to attack the lawyer that was trying to have them committed. But now they're, this is about as safe as we're going to get.
But you also notice there is no way to get to it. So we have the chase that's on the penthouse. It goes all the way down and in the basement. But there's some access ports we will show you that will kind of make that point. So if we were to want to expand the HVAC system or do things like that, we physically would have to tear the building down to get to it. I mean, 12th floor all the way down. So we don't have,
Shaft.
exactly. And so if we needed to come in and replace pipes on whatever floors, you could just imagine the nightmares of trying to get to them because A, you'd have to fight past these pipes. Two, there's no type of, maintenance egress talked about in here at all. So this is one of the biggest issues for everybody that wants to say, well, let's retrofit this building, let's try to do this. Physically, mechanically, the guts of the building, trying to get to them to make them work. Like I said, this is stories down. There's no supports, there's just supports for the pipes. There's no way for us to get to it.
Platforms in between.
No, that's correct, nothing. If you stuck your head in, you look straight down. There's nothing there. And the other access is at the very top where we're at the penthouse where the boiler room runs.
There are days that we come back here and this place is, you're lucky if you have a seat. Sometimes they're standing up here. This place is packed full and they're waiting for their name to get called. And this is where we hold them when they go up to all of the courts.
We're talking about a lot of angry men then.
Oh, it all depends. We say a lot of angry men, but sometimes this is their day for justice, their day to be able to, so you have a lot of hopeful people sitting in here, but at times it does get angry. And if you think about packing people in here, people are frustrated, angry, ready to go, or after they get handed down a verdict and we have to bring them down here and get put in. So it's very volatile in here at all times. Take you down, and then we will, then I'm gonna hold you down in the holding area down there. I'm gonna go back up and down and move you all up and down.
That's a lot, to say the least.
Once you get in the elevator and you realize when I'm transporting, or when these young men right here are transporting multiple individuals, it gets real tight. And not to mention that this is also the judges or the elevators the judges use to go to their offices. So if y'all would go ahead and step inside, if we could pack it as full as we can.
Over here too?
Yep.
Wow.
Need to get in the cell. All right, I think we got enough. Mike, if I get you to slide, there you go. You gonna run this for me? All right, so keep this in mind. This elevator gets used quite often. All right, we've had judges get stuck in this elevator. We've had inmates and officers get stuck in this elevator, and getting stuck isn't just, hey, we're stuck. Now you got to call the elevator crew, so you can be stuck in here for a couple hours. As you can see, the mayor parks here, the city manager parks here. All right. And this is where we have to unload inmates at. If you're coming to get a job, we're unloading murderers and people that are on trial for murderers, and you have to come up through here and you'll see a van or a car parked here as we're getting inmates out. One, that provides serious safety and security risks for the officers, because if I want to come break somebody out, we have no protection. All right. And two, if I want to do harm to another inmate, or if one decides to run, where do we have to keep them from running? If you think about it, it's wide open. If one wants to run, it's wide open. So we have to be on our top security level conscience and making sure we're blocking all avenues right here. But this is our sally port. This is how we deliver. And while we're doing that, judges are coming in. And like I said, judges and inmates take the same elevator.
Sheriff in the back, Donna Tompkins, is here. Thank you for being here as well. So we also have our architect who is working with us, and we have several that are working with us, Michael Starr, and of course I have Johnny Harp here with he's the manager of our facilities maintenance division. And these guys can certainly answer the questions for you regarding what you will see today, and then of course the condition of the government center. So are there any questions thus far of what you have seen? Yes. Almost 50 years old. Almost 50 years old, yes. It's up there. It's up there. Other questions? Okay, well, hearing none, I'm going to ask Michael Starr if he will he's going to kind of share with you what you will see on those boards. And again, this is a walking around meeting today and not necessarily a seated meeting. So what you want to do is really just kind of, are you going to bring it up this way, Mike? How you want to do it?
Just switch these around. So we
Okay.
can go from scenario 1 to 2 to 3.
Okay,
And then the last board over there.
Okay.
all square footage
okay,
and
all right,
prices.
sounds good.
Right.
Okay. Mike, can someone help him? Yeah. Well, I think that's straight. 2 is good. He's just changing 1 and 3, so 2 is fine. Okay, and then he will explain all of that.
All right. So I know the folks on the other side of the room are gonna, unless you've got. Can y'all hear me over there? Y'all might wanna come over unless you have telescopic vision. It's gonna be
want to come and see the
hard to see what I'm describing here. But this is, we've got 3 scenarios laid out in front of you here. And before I start getting into specifics, would just like to say that these are all, none of these are building designs. These are only site concept studies. So these are all site concept studies that really just look at possible building placement and massing. We have this scenario here, which would maintain the tower and the wings and add the necessary space to make up for the deficiencies that exist currently and are projected to exist over the next 10 years or so. Scenario number 2 is a scheme where the tower is maintained, the wings are torn down, and an addition for Judicial is built on the north and south sides of the existing tower, and a new administrative building is built kind of in the northeast corner. And then the far scenario is looks at complete demolition of the current government center and what a new government center might look like. So with this option, you can see images that look very similar to what you're used to seeing and have been seeing for 45 years or so. And a multi-story addition that would accommodate Judicial, mainly Judicial functions here, and the wings would generally serve as the office portions, but you would still have offices mixed in with Judicial use as well. Just because of the way the building's configured, everything doesn't work out perfectly in terms of the square footages where you could completely isolate the city offices versus just the Judicial, which we call Judicial and non-Judicial. We would have proposed the existing parking deck then would stay, that's below grade, and possibly a new parking deck would be erected on the other side of 10th Street where the flat parking area currently exists. So again, this would be the addition to accommodate the square footage that we have a deficit on the Judicial side right now, and would also create a new entry. As we know, that's one of kind of the biggest problems. One of the larger problems of the current facility is it does not have a front door. Nobody knows how to get in there. And even when you do find it, you're entering in the bowels of the building. So we would propose to provide a new front door as part of that. But of course, because you've still got many of the limitations of the existing building, it's going to be less than ideal. I will say that a lot of the problems that you looked at there in terms of mechanical issues and piping and so forth could be alleviated because the proposal would tear everything down to, in terms of the interiors, all of the walls, ceilings, mechanical systems, piping would disappear. That would all be demolished, and it would be completely rebuilt from the concrete and the exterior walls in. Now, the exterior walls would also be torn out back to structure, so you've got curtain wall in between the structural columns that you can see here, which is inefficient quarter-inch glazing that causes a tremendous amount of heat load. As John was talking about on the video, on the south side, on this side of the building, you get direct impact, and on the east and west, of course, you get a lot of heat gain there. And because the HVAC system is old and it's not zoned properly, you get cold people on the north side, you get people that are hot on the south side. We would take care of that with systems and install new, much more efficient insulated glazing systems with low E coatings and so forth, everything up to or exceeding energy codes and so forth, like you would design a new building. So that would do a couple of things. That would make the occupants a lot more comfortable, and it would save a significant amount of money on energy use every year. One of the other things that I wanted to mention was, in addition to the expansion on the south side, because of some of the issues on the inside with circulation and emergency egress, it would be necessary to add on some sort of vertical element, which is just kind of blocked in right here. Again, these are not building designs, but some vertical elements would need to be put in place for possibly new elevators and or stairs. The current stairs do not meet code. They're not even close to meeting code. The rails do not meet code. They don't handle enough people. You've got your largest load of people is at the courtrooms at the very top of the building. The stairways are not wide enough to accommodate the number of people that can be in those courtrooms. The doors aren't wide enough. There's no way with the limitations of the existing structure to enlarge those stairs. So you'd be looking at some outboard modifications, which could open up the opportunity to expand the restrooms and make those handicap accessible. But again, since you're going back to the existing structure, everything that's built new would be up to current code. So it would be a fully accessible building, and it would meet all of your life safety codes, would be sprinklered, et cetera. It is a safety hazard right now without the sprinkler system. And the stairwells on tall buildings such as we have here should be pressurized to keep smoke out in a fire situation. That's also not in place right now, so there's a number of safety issues that we would address under this scenario as well.
And I think you're also in the video that we only have fire,
Sprinklers.
Sprinkler systems only in the parking deck and on the ground floor of the government center, nowhere else. That's it.
Right, so again, where most of your people are on court day up here, you got a long way to go if there were a fire to get out of the building. So we would alleviate that situation with new life safety systems. Any questions on this scenario?
Have there ever been sprinkler systems on the upper levels?
No, ma'am.
No?
No, ma'am.
Excuse me. Am I
Yes.
to understand that this particular scenario is just pretty much just to preserve the exterior? I mean, largely?
It would, this is a scenario that would preserve it as much as possible while still preparing it to serve for another 50 years by modernizing the systems, by modernizing the exterior envelope like we were talking about to be more efficient. But this comes closest to preserving the building in its current form, yes. Unfortunately, in order to make it functional, you would have to put a rather large addition somewhere on the building, and the south side being the most obvious if the wings are maintained. So that's why it's being proposed there. So you really want to touch the existing building as little as possible, but again, for safety purposes and for functional reasons, additions are required. So the current square footage is not going to, it's currently too small, and of course, as things continue to grow, additional courts and so forth, it's just going to continue to get smaller as the years progress. Any other questions? All right, I'll move down to scenario number 2, which again, we'll look at the site plan first. This proposes keeping the government center tower, demolishing the wings, and building a separate office building for city functions at the corner of 10th and 2nd Avenue here that is oriented perpendicular to the existing Judicial Center here, but parallel with the wings that would sit here and here. And what that helps to do is create a much more scenarios have in common, being cognizant of the fact that in scenario 1, where the existing design, because of the way it's configured in a U shape and the plazas are raised and inaccessible to the public, it feels very insular, it feels very closed off. It is the antithesis of being a public building in a lot of ways. So both of these try to address that by welcoming the public into the site with large open areas that could be used potentially after hours. And additions here that would be lower in scale because you've got additional square footage here. So you can do 2 similar additions at a smaller scale for new courtrooms and associated functions. The existing parking deck would go away, and as would all of the kind of restrictions that you've got there, the lack of sally port, et cetera. And we'd propose a new below-grade parking deck here that potentially could be secured for sheriff and either employee use or judges or whatever is decided in the future, but that could have secure entry points to both buildings that are below grade. Could have separate entries for judges, employees, and of course prisoners that are coming for trial. So it would be a much more secure situation there. And in order to get enough parking, you would then look at another parking structure across 9th Street there. The green that you see here is just showing possibly a green roof, a courtyard on top of these 2 additions here. And then you can see kind of from a massing standpoint how this is a lot lower than what we were looking at in scenario 1. And then the city office building here kind of holds the corner down at the corner of 2nd Avenue and 10th there. And this would be the view from the opposite corner looking into that new open courtyard that's created there with entry elements here and here and creating that public space, which I think certainly desirable. Any questions on this scenario? All right, we'll move down to the last scenario, which is a complete tear down of the existing facility, proposing a new judicial center that's behind the footprint of the existing judicial center, and then a new government building on the opposite corner. The previous scenario we're looking at had government admin building here. This shows it at this corner here, relates in scale to the River Center, holds this kind of urban edge that exists now. But here we're creating 2 large open public spaces. This would be more the formal kind of front yard, and then this would be the less formal backyard that creates an extension here of the green space all the way from Broadway past the River Center and then terminates here in front of the Springer, which keeps that open space there, which I think is nice. And the building also steps down in scale here to address the smaller structures that are there along 2nd Avenue. Parking would be provided here on the south half of the site, below grade, again, secure entrances into both facilities, and drive-through, drop-off, etc. here, additional parking above grade here. And what this allows us to do, the placement of the building here, maintain the existing tower. You tear down the wings, you build the new Judicial Center behind it, and once that's complete, move everybody into it, and then you demolish the existing tower and build a new government building. So you don't have to go through all the pain of relocating everyone in the offices and having temporary courtrooms, which would be necessary really with both of the other options we're looking at, because all of the construction would be proposed to be done at one time rather than going floor by floor, which would obviously take a lot longer and be substantially more expensive. Any question on this scenario? Walk over and just show you a little bit of the massing. So this would be the proposed Judicial Center here. It's very open on the north and south sides. Would also have shading, again, high technology glazing to keep the heat gain down. You've got two buildings that are similar in scale. So this is a little bit smaller and skinnier footprint for the office building, and the Judicial building would be a little bit taller. All of the major court spaces being in a lower block below it, and then the support functions would really be above it. But again, that allows the building to step down in scale to relate to the buildings across 2nd Avenue. And it also allows both of these buildings to feel friendly with each other and not have, since most of the program is really here, not have a big brother, little brother effect. You've got two buildings that are similar and monumental at the same time. And
I have a question.
yes.
Approximately how many floors are you talking about for each building, generally?
I think that we're talking about 12 to 14 floors here and 7 to 8 stories here. And the pricing also has a line item for shelling an additional floor in each building for future use, so that we don't run into the same kind of issues 10 or 15 years down the road where we realize, we built it for our current needs and what we projected, but hey, we've grown a lot more and now we can't fit here and we have to start getting annexes and other buildings like we've had to do in the past. So it's a lot easier to build an additional floor and just keep it completely open, called a shelled space or a white box space, so that it's easily built out in the future. All of the systems would be designed to accommodate that additional load and so forth during the initial design, and that just allows a lot more flexibility.
So your proposal on number 3 is one white box space in each building, one, is that
That's
correct?
one floor.
One floor?
Yes, one
extra
floor,
that's
one
just
extra
sitting
floor
there. I got you.
that's empty when the
nothing
building
really built.
when the building opens, yes, and can be filled in the future, yes.
Gotcha.
Of course, this is very early.
Oh, yeah.
That could be cut out at some point, but it's
I heard
just
that story about the building that we're in, that was a proposal early on, and
That's
they
correct.
chose not to do it, and now doing it would cost a whole lot more money.
absolutely. Mhm. So that's just addressing that concern up front, because this is a master plan kind of idea, and it makes sense to do that. So we have put that in. So everybody wants to know about money. Again, we don't have real buildings to design. These are just concepts and big ideas. But we did have to put pencil to paper and try and get some rough figures out there for everybody to understand the kind of order of magnitude that we're talking about here. For scenario number 1, all in, you're looking at about $115 million. So that would be a complete renovation of the existing facility and an addition. That includes the parking structure. Scenario 2, looking at something very similar in cost, about $116 million. And then scenario number 3, $127 million. So there's only projected to be about a $12 million delta between scenario 1 and 3. You also do have a little bit more exposure a little bit more risk exposure with both 1 and 2. When you're renovating a building, you just never know what you're going to run into sometimes when you start tearing out walls and so forth. You might find some ugly surprises sometimes, so you'd have to add a little bit more contingency into that. In addition, the square footage on both of these had to be bumped up because you're dealing with existing structures, the inefficiencies that you run into when you have to keep an existing structure where things really don't fit together like they would in a new building would cause the size of the program to increase. So these numbers reflect that. We've got about a 30,000 square foot premium between the renovation scenarios and the new construction. Any other questions? All right.
You got a lot of green space. I guess, is it just simply because you don't need to fill it up? I mean, or is that?
Well, there's a.
Intended for, I guess, future growth. I mean, you know.
It could be future growth. It certainly gives you flexibility, and that's what you're looking for in a master plan. You don't want to put yourself in a bind where you couldn't build expansions or additional buildings in the future, and we certainly could structure columns and so forth in this area to support a similar building on this corner if it were so desired. But also a lot of it had to do with creating that open space and having a site that feels more like it belongs to the people in response to what we've got right now, which is very, very closed off. We want to invite people into this space, and this in particular being an extension all the way to Broadway and being that open space in front of Springer could be used for any number of functions. I tell you what, I have never seen so many people downtown as this past Friday when the Prince Tribute Band was there. And it was standing room only, and you could barely circulate on Broadway. So our functions are just getting larger and larger. The scale of Uptown is increasing, and I think on some of these major events, this could be used as overflow space.
I have another question. On this diagram here, you have a parking deck. That would be for public parking, people utilizing the Judicial building, and that's currently where that flat parking lot that you pay to get into?
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Because I'm sure if you're coming to court, you need somewhere to park.
Absolutely.
Is it going to be a
Absolutely.
one solid thing, or are you talking about building a parking deck structure?
This would be a parking structure, potentially.
That would sort of be able to hold more cars?
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
think it's very similar to the River Center Garage. I think was kind of the numbers that they were looking at.
That's correct. You're looking at, it could be anything, but you're looking at between 400 and 500 cars probably for that, and between 200 and 300 for an underground facility there. It's a lot more expensive to build underground, so you don't want to do everything underground. You end up 80 stories deep, and 80 feet deep, and that's pretty expensive. So, and it's a lot easier for the public certainly to access an above grade parking structure. But I think you really need a combination of both for security. Yes. I certainly don't need to tell you that, Sheriff.
I have a question, and it may be too early to ask this question, but have operational costs been estimated based on any of the scenarios?
These are only construction costs, so we haven't estimated operational costs, though we have just in general looked at some big picture numbers in terms of how much more efficient this building would be, and there would be a significant savings. We would project a significant savings of over hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially per year just for energy usage. As you're looking at LED lights versus the fluorescence that you have in here now, you're looking at much more efficient systems, exterior walls, et cetera. So.
Following up on that question, that's a super question. Would you anticipate greater operational savings in an utterly new structure as opposed to the gutted retrofitted structure in 1 and 2?
You would.
Okay. So you couldn't get that old shell to what?
It wouldn't be as efficient. I think you could get fairly close because you're talking about a concrete structure, and concrete is a mass material that doesn't transmit a tremendous amount of heat and cold. So yes, it could get close. Particularly if in the office, the existing wings, if you took the brick off, for example, and either changed that to a majority glazing material, curtain wall or something like that, that was more efficient, or you tore the brick off, insulated it, and then put the brick back on, because if it is insulated right now, it's certainly not up to current standards. And it's a pretty dark area. It doesn't have any natural light. Those wings, I wouldn't want to work there.
I think a question about scenario 2, it was kind of nebulous what that extra building would be used for. Kind of said maybe for after-hour events.
In this scenario?
Yeah.
Oh, this would be government offices. This building on this corner here would be all non-judicial offices.
Just sounds like something different.
It's all right. Yeah, so that's the same in both of these. It's just located here in this, and then in the other scenario, since you're tearing down the tower, it would be located over in that corner. And again, here, this is located on this side versus this side, simply to keep that openness and create that public space that connects to Uptown and to Broadway.
I think a lot of pushback here has, I mean, everyone wants to do, right, energy efficient, and everything costs money. I think a lot of the pushback here is the expense. So I guess my question is, I mean, I don't even know, I'm sort of speaking out of turn, so I don't want to, misrepresent that I know a lot, but is there any provision in these benefits here? Like, for example, the open spaces, like, can that be rented out for a private company to generate revenue to help offset these expenses for all this good stuff?
It certainly could, and in theory, this area here could be retail or restaurant, and you've got open space out here so that the public, as well as people that work here, can eat lunch outside. There's a covered area here, so there are potential things that could be designed to provide revenue.
Or like an outdoor concert?
Oh, well, no question about it. I mean, that's flexibility that you're looking at. But yes,
I think the restaurant thing, that's a great idea.
Well, I don't know, I'm just thinking everyone is always worried about the bill, right, the tax bill, so
right. Well,
I'm trying to figure out ways to sort of offset that.
and that's why I pointed out there the difference between these three scenarios is only 12 million. So when you're looking at that as an overall percentage, it's not very significant.
Yeah, but I think there are people who may not have seen the videos. I mean, it's not even the 12 million difference, it's that first 100 million.
Well,
That's, I think that's.
sure, it's a big ticket item, no question about it, to renovate the existing building and do it the right way. There's no cheap option if you want to do it the right way. I mean, the building's been limping along for many years. Oh, sure. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we're supposed to talk about. But the building, and I think one of the things that this forum provides is that opportunity to get a better understanding, if you don't use the building or really visit it very often, just what some of the conditions are that would necessitate a significant renovation and or possibly new construction. So there's just some things that are very expensive and you can't fix without completely tearing them out and putting something new in there. So that's something that everyone needs to kind of develop a comfort level with, I think. And some of the biggest things are life safety issues. Again, you've got all of the people in the courtroom spaces at the top of the building. If there's a fire, there's no sprinkler system, your stairs aren't pressurized, and your stairs are A, too close together. They're, by code, they should be half the longest diagonal, and they're about half the longest diagonal. So they're very close together. You couldn't build a new building like that these days, and the width of the stairs is too narrow to accommodate the number of people that you could have on any of those upper floors. So that's a pretty big deal. I think public safety should be considered by everyone, because, again, the courts are for the public and for everyone. A lot of people who aren't criminals go to these trials. We've got judges, we've got sheriff's officers, we've got employees, we've got many people who, we got news crews that visit those. Sure.
I'll be up here.
Can you talk a little bit about, so if we're talking about demolishing a structure like this, no matter what you do, there's a significant, I guess it's a landfill impact. Is there more of one scenario, you're leaving the outside shell in 1 and 2 versus demolishing it in 3, but what does that look like from our landfill load? What happens to a building like that when you tear it down?
Well, I'm probably not the best person to answer that. And then I'm not a landfill expert. But, just in general, talking about demolition, you got a lot of concrete. These are concrete structures. So there is recycling that can happen with that. That can be reused. Any structural steel can also be recycled. Aluminum can be recycled. So a significant portion of what is in place can be recycled. There will be a landfill impact. There's no way around that.
But it's not like you just take the whole thing.
You're not going to take all of it together. No. And I think doing it sustainably, if it were decided to completely take it down, or, each one of these has demolition involved. Obviously, the least amount of demolition is scenario 1, but you're still talking about taking all of the curtain wall out and putting new curtain wall in. So that would have some impact, but most of that can be recycled. But with each one, you do increase the landfill. But even there, studs and drywall and things like that, you're taking all of that out. So that is an issue, but it's important for us to do it sustainably.
And so once we take care of the recycling that we're able to garner from all of that, then of course any of the additional construction and demolition material would then go out to the city landfill. And so it would be a slight impact, but not very much. Not very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Parking at scenario 3.
So with scenario 3,
Okay.
um,
That's that part.
yes. So again, we have parking here, but we would propose below grade parking
Okay, I'm sorry.
here. No, that's fine. No problem.
How long is the turnaround on these respective projects? Is it 5 years? To start breaking ground or demolition?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. We do have, since we all know that design and construction is not going to start tomorrow, we have escalation built in, I believe, for 5 years for each one of these, all the way through. That's 6 years to 2023. There is an escalation factor of approximately $10 to $11 million in each one of these. So that's, I think, from the start of design to the completion of construction, there would be some difference between each one of these, but you're looking at about a 3-year process.
What would happen to the offices and the courts in the process of tearing the building down and rebuilding? You got a 4 or 5 year span. Where would the courts go and the other offices go while you're doing that? Especially if you're talking about demolishing one building and building another.
Sure. So each one of these is going to be a little bit different. Obviously, like I said, with this scenario, the Judicial Center would be built while the existing tower is in place and the wings would be torn down. So here, you would have to find some temporary home for the offices and so forth that exist in the current wings. And however, The toughest thing to deal with from a security standpoint and just finding space, building out space and so forth would be the courts. So this avoids that significant impact. So moving down to scenario 2, we are maintaining the tower and again taking the wings out. So, but while the tower is maintained, all of this construction is going on concurrently. So this scenario and scenario number 1, you would have to find temporary courtrooms and temporary office space for everything that exists in the site right now.
There are any plans to where that may happen?
I probably might ask Lisa that
You know,
question.
that's something that we would have to consider. It may even be that we look at some property that we may have to lease just until that time, or do some rental. But we would first of all look at our current properties that we have, and you know, it may be that some of those spaces, like at the annex, that room there that we have, the conference room, may have to put up some offices or some, you know, something in order to make room for individuals to be there. So it's just something that we have to look at.
Yeah, this exercise that you're looking at really didn't get into the details of relocating people. That would be the next step. Once it's decided that, hey, we've got a real project and we're going to move forward, then the logistics of that would be discussed and detailed.
There's cost to that too.
There is cost to that.
I mean, it may not make up the gap.
It's part of the soft cost of the project, that, and these are just construction costs, but you're right. Yes, sir.
Was there any communication with the private sector to see if there was any interest in perhaps them taking on that as mixed retail, commercial, and whatever funds we could get out of it, moving to another site?
That was discussed in the committee, and you know, nothing is off the table, obviously, at this point. Yes, it was discussed. It was eliminated early on in favor of actually, it was determined by the committee that the idea of maintaining this site, which has been continuously used for many, many years as a judicial site, that was relevant and important to the community, that we maintain that, and that's what we've done here. Anyone else?
And I know that we have some commission members here as well, and definitely want to recognize them if they will just kind of raise your hand and tell us who you are. Yeah, just give your name for those people who don't know you, Brian.
Brian Andrews, President of Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, right here, I just got it.
I'm Joy Norman. I'm the chair of the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities and Family Representation.
Any additional? Yes.
I'm a member of the Sheriff Tompkins.
I'm
on the building
That's right.
commission.
That's right,
Yeah.
yes.
What's the timeline on the public voting on this?
No, don't have one right now. It's kind of, we're still in just that, in the process of just getting the public comment at this point. And then we'll go back to the commission, look at all of the comments from the various meetings this evening, and then we still have to determine, you know, where we go from here. And so, we've not gotten quite that far. We know it's gonna take some time, just to even the construction piece, but, we're easily looking at least 5 years. It still has to go to city council for, consideration and of course, determine funding and everything else.
All right, well, if nobody has any other questions they would like to voice, I'll be here if y'all want to, you know, just kind of walk around, and if anything else comes to mind, I'll be here to answer any questions.